Somewhere right now, someone is unlocking your phone. Not with your fingerprint, not with your face, with a photo of your face held up in front of the camera while you were asleep, distracted, or simply not paying attention. And in that 5-second window, before you even realize what happened, everything on that device becomes accessible. Your messages, your banking apps, your photos, your identity. This isn't a hypothetical. This is happening quietly every single day. And almost nobody talks about it because it doesn't sound dramatic enough to make headlines. But here's the part that should actually terrify you. The fix takes exactly 5 seconds. Not 5 minutes, not a software update. 5 seconds. And most Android users have never even heard of it. Let's slow down because this story doesn't start with the fix. It starts with the problem, and the problem is bigger than most people understand. For years, we've been told that biometric security is the gold standard. Fingerprint scanners, facial recognition, on-body detection, all marketed as the future of protecting your device. And in fairness, for casual theft, they work reasonably well. But what they were never designed to stop is a targeted attack. A situation where someone specifically wants into your phone and is willing to force the issue. Law enforcement forensic tools, for example, don't need your password if they can hold your phone up to your face while you're restrained or unconscious. Thieves who snatch a phone out of your hand at a red light don't need your fingerprint if they can press your thumb against the sensor before you even process what's happening. Read that again. The very features sold to you as security can, in specific and increasingly common scenarios, become the exact vulnerability an attacker exploits. And this is where most people's understanding of phone security completely falls apart, because the assumption has always been, if my phone is locked, I'm safe. That assumption is wrong. A locked phone with biometrics enabled is not the same as a phone that cannot be accessed. There's a difference between a lock and a lock that can be defeated by force, coercion, or deception. What most people are not seeing is that biometric authentication was built for convenience first and adversarial resistance second. It was designed to keep out casual snoopers, not determined attackers. And in 2026, the number of scenarios where someone is deliberately targeting a specific device, not randomly, but specifically, is rising fast. Think about what that actually means for a second. Journalists working on sensitive stories, activists in politically unstable regions, domestic abuse survivors trying to protect evidence, business executives carrying confidential data across borders, ordinary people who simply get robbed by someone smart enough to know that forcing a face unlock is faster than guessing a 6-digit PIN. These aren't rare edge cases anymore. They're becoming the new normal of digital risk, and the industry has been scrambling to respond. This is where the story shifts, because in early 2026, security researchers and mobile forensic experts started documenting something else entirely. A rise in so-called forensic extraction attempts, where specialized devices, the kind used by police departments and increasingly by private actors with access to leaked or black market hardware, are used to pull data off Android phones without ever needing the owner's cooperation. According to reporting from digital rights organizations tracking spyware and forensic tools, these devices don't care about your PIN. They exploit the fact that most phones remain in a partially unlocked vulnerable state for far longer than users realize, and biometric convenience features often leave a wider attack surface open than a simple passcode would. So Google did something about it. Quietly, without much fanfare, Android built in a feature that most users have scrolled past a dozen times without understanding what it actually does. It's called lockdown mode. And here's where the 5-second trick comes in. Lockdown mode is not a new gimmick. It's been sitting inside Android's power menu for several versions now, largely ignored. Treated as a footnote instead of what it actually is. One of the single most effective, instantly deployable security actions available on any modern smartphone. Here's what it does the moment you activate it. It immediately disables all biometric unlocking. Fingerprint, face, iris, everything. It shuts down Smart Lock, the feature that keeps your phone unlocked near trusted devices or trusted locations. It hides your notifications from the lock screen so nobody can glance at your messages without unlocking the device. And it forces the only path back in to be your PIN, password, or pattern. Something that exists only in your memory. Something that cannot be lifted off your face while you're asleep. Something that cannot be pressed against your thumb while you're being restrained. But here's where it gets worse, in the sense that most people don't even know this feature exists on their own device. It's buried inside display or lock screen settings, disabled by default, requiring you to manually turn on something called Show Lockdown option, before it even appears as a button you can press, which means the very people who need it most in a moment of crisis, the moment someone is trying to force their way into a locked phone, often don't have it activated because nobody ever told them it was there. And this is where everything changes, because in 2026, this stopped being a niche feature for security researchers and started becoming something the entire industry is racing to build around. Samsung, for instance, made a decision that quietly rewrote how millions of Galaxy devices handle this exact threat. With the rollout of One UI 9, built on Android 17, Samsung removed the option to skip lockdown mode from the power menu entirely. It's no longer something you have to remember to press. According to reporting on the beta rollout, the power menu now automatically triggers lockdown behavior the moment it's engaged, disabling biometric access and forcing PIN entry by default, whether the user consciously chooses it or not. Samsung didn't do this as a minor UI tweak. They did this because internal threat data made it clear that forced biometric access had become common enough to justify removing the choice altogether. Think about the significance of that decision for a second. A major manufacturer looked at real-world attack patterns and concluded that leaving this as optional was itself a security failure. That's not marketing language. That's a company admitting, indirectly, that the previous system left too many people exposed. But lockdown mode is only the first layer of this story, and if you stop here, you're missing the part that actually matters most. Because 5-second tricks solve the problem of someone physically forcing their way into your device. They do almost nothing against the threat that's grown even faster over the last 18 months: remote compromise, spyware, zero-day exploits, attacks that don't need your phone in their hands at all. This is where Google's response gets significantly more serious and significantly less known to the average user. In 2025, Android quietly rolled out something called Advanced Protection Mode, a feature explicitly built to counter state-sponsored spyware and forensic extraction tools used against high-risk individuals, journalists, dissidents, human rights workers, of people whose phones are targets not of opportunity, but of deliberate, funded, sophisticated operations. According to documentation tracking the feature's development, it wasn't built for casual users. It was built because sophisticated attackers were exploiting previously unknown vulnerabilities, what security researchers call zero-day exploits, to compromise devices belonging to exactly the kind of people who cannot afford to be compromised. And then, in May of 2026, Google expanded it further with something called intrusion logging. This is the part of the story most YouTube videos about hacker tricks will never mention, because it's not flashy, it's not a 5-second toggle, and it requires you to actually understand what's happening. Intrusion. Logging works by having Android quietly store security-related events in encrypted form on dedicated secure servers, with the encryption key existing only on your device. What that means, practically, is that if you ever suspect your phone has been targeted, you can download and decrypt that log yourself and hand it to digital forensic experts who can examine it for the fingerprints of an attack. Read that again. Your phone is now capable of building its own case file against whoever tried to break into it, without exposing that data to anyone but you. This is not chaos. This is strategy. Google didn't build this feature for the average person scrolling social media. They built it because Apple's lockdown mode, a similar high security feature introduced back in 2022, had already demonstrated something remarkable. Security researchers at Citizen Lab confirmed that Apple's version actively blocked a real attempt to infect a target with sophisticated spyware built by NSO Group, one of the most notorious commercial spyware developers in the world. Apple has publicly stated it has never detected a successful attack against a user who had that mode enabled. Not rarely, never. And that statistic alone should tell you everything about why Android scrambled to build its own equivalent. But here's the escalation most people aren't tracking. And it's the part that turns this from a story about phone settings into a story about the shifting landscape of digital power. The tools used to break into phones aren't just spyware built by shadowy foreign intelligence contractors anymore. They're increasingly commercial, increasingly available, and increasingly aimed downward, not just at world leaders and dissidents, but at ordinary people caught up in domestic disputes, corporate espionage, or financially motivated crime. Forensic extraction devices, the kind originally built for law enforcement, have leaked into markets where private investigators, and in some documented cases, malicious actors with no legal authority whatsoever, have gotten their hands on them. The same technology built to fight crime is now, in certain cases, being used to enable it. And this is where the scam economy folds into the same story, because the industry isn't only worried about forensic tools anymore. According to Google's own 2026 security briefing, scammers have industrialized a technique called spoofing, where internet-based calling systems let attackers disguise their caller ID to appear as your bank or financial institution. These aren't small numbers. Google's own figures peg losses from these social engineering and impersonation scams at close to $980 million annually, worldwide. That's not a rounding error. That's an entire criminal economy built around exploiting the same basic vulnerability at the heart of this whole story: the gap between what your phone shows you and what's actually true. In response, Android has started rolling out real-time call verification features, beginning with partnerships with financial institutions like Revolut, Adaú, and Nubank, designed to flag incoming calls that are likely impersonating your bank before you even answer. Think about what that means. Your phone is being turned in real time into a threat detection system, not just a communication device. The battlefield has moved from "can someone unlock my phone" to "can my phone tell me in real time that the voice on the other end is lying to me?" So where does this leave the average person? The one who just wants their phone secured and doesn't have the time to become a cybersecurity expert? Here's the real story, the one that gets buried under clickbait titles promising a single trick that blocks all hackers. There's no single setting, no 5-second toggle, no secret code that makes any device invulnerable. Anyone telling you otherwise is selling you a fantasy, and fantasies get people hurt because they create false confidence. What actually exists is a layered defense, built from several deliberate decisions, each one closing a different door that attackers rely on. The first door is lockdown mode, and yes, it genuinely takes about 5 seconds to enable in your settings and mere moments to trigger from your power button when you feel unsafe. It closes the door on forced biometric access, the scenario where someone tries to unlock your phone using your face or fingerprint against your will. If you do nothing else after watching this, go into your display or lock screen settings right now, find the option to show lockdown in your power menu, and turn it on. It costs you nothing. It removes almost no convenience. And it closes one of the most exploited physical attack vectors that exists today. The second door is advanced protection mode, and this one matters most if your risk profile is higher than average. If you're a journalist, an activist, someone handling sensitive information, or simply someone who wants the strongest defense against sophisticated remote attacks, rather than just physical coercion. It's not built for convenience. It's built to reduce your attack surface as aggressively as possible, even if that means some features feel more restrictive day to day. The third door, and the one almost nobody talks about, is the intrusion logging system, quietly running in the background for those who enable it, building an encrypted record that only you can unlock, waiting to be handed to forensic experts the moment you suspect something has gone wrong. This is the part of modern phone security that finally treats your device not just as something to defend, but as something capable of testifying on your behalf after an attack, turning a violated device into evidence instead of just a loss. And the fourth door, the one that requires no toggle at all, just awareness, is understanding that scams no longer look like scams. They look like your bank calling with a spoofed number, using urgency and fear to get you to move money or hand over a code. No lockdown mode stops a scam that convinces you to cooperate willingly. That gap can only be closed by pausing, by refusing to act under pressure, by calling your bank back on a number you looked up yourself rather than one that called you. Here's where this story should leave you, because it's not finished, and it never will be. Every defense described here was built in direct response to an attack that had already succeeded somewhere, against someone. Lockdown mode exists because forced biometric access became common enough to demand it. Advanced protection mode exists because zero-day spyware was already being used against real journalists before anyone built a countermeasure. Intrusion logging exists because victims of attacks had no way to prove what happened to them until this year. Every single layer of security you now have access to was built after someone else paid the price of not having it. Which means the real question isn't whether your phone is secure right now. It's what's already being built to defeat the very features described in this video, somewhere in a lab you'll never see, funded by people you'll never know, aimed at a vulnerability nobody has publicly discovered yet. The 5-second trick you just learned will protect you against today's threat. It will not protect you against whatever comes next. And if the pattern of the last 3 years holds, whatever comes next is already being tested, quietly, on someone else's device, right now, while you're watching this. So the real question is not, am I safe? The real question is, when the next gap gets discovered, and it will you be the person who finds out from a headline after the damage is done, or the person who already turned on the one setting that would have made the difference? That choice takes 5 seconds. What happens if you don't make it might take a lot longer to undo.